All right, well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to sort of the conversation. So think of this as a conversation about AI and sort of the kind of contemporary conversation, right, that we all maybe engage in a normal day-to-day basis of like, hey, what is AI? What does it mean? How does it impact us? And thinking about sort of that connection to the broader theme of justice, right? So the sort of symposiums, foundational overarching theme on justice. So here, that's the question is, how are algorithms sort of being treated in a sort of note to justice as fairness? So any of my philosophy major friends, there's a philosophy major here with the other McRae, you would get the reference to John Rawls. All right, so just a quick overview. We'll talk a little bit about the different types of AI, so specifically two broad categories, thinking about agentic AI and then thinking about generative AI. So it's an important distinction for us to be able to define these two types of AI because the way we think about them and the way we understand them frames the context of their use. And so we'll talk a little bit about the intersection of equity, ethics, and the rule of law in the sort of broader conversation around sort of justice. Okay? And so we'll think about how we build that into sort of accountability, transparency of use of AI, and then thinking about sort of democratic institutions in their context of AI. All right, so just a quick question. Is AI in an existential crisis? So what we're sort of thinking here is, ask this of you, is there sort of an existential question about the existence of AI? What does the existence of AI mean? What does it mean to you? So it's an open question. I'm not defining it for you yet. So how do you feel about it? Yeah.
I feel like it's the future, perhaps.
Okay, yeah. So that definitely is a part of the definition, right? Is the future, the way in which technology is developing. Good. What else? How else might it be defined?
So AI is so new still that even now people are like, AI is not going to take over my jobs. Look at what it's created. Look what it's doing. And of course it's messing up. However, that's just the beginning. I think it's going to improve. And it might very well take over a lot of us.
Yeah, so that's an important, especially policy question currently, right? Is there potential for job displacement, right? Or how do we what we call reskill individuals to sort of think about integrating AI into the workplace?
I think that would be used because it was
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So as with, we had a number of conversations earlier at lunch about the positives, the sort of pros of AI, and the potential concerns or some of the challenges that might be associated with AI, right? As we get new technologies, this is a common question that we have is, what are the benefits and what are the potential challenges that we might face from the development of a technology? All right. So there are kind of three broad categories for AI, and that I want to define these here a little bit so that way we are able to sort of think through the different sections of AI. So predictive AI, these are risk tools. They can be used in things like predictive policing. We have what we call generative AI. These are ones where potential concerns around deepfakes, AI-generated documents, and we'll go into more detail in a couple of these real quick. And then the last one is agentic AI. And this is the AI that is cognizant or able to sort of make decisions on its own without the human in the loop of the process of the decision making. So generative AI, this is probably the one that we might be most familiar with when we sort of colloquially use the term AI. This is AI that creates new content, texts, images, videos, things like ChatGPT, Copilot, right? The sort of LLM, the language learning models, these are that generative AI space. Some contemporary examples of potential challenges with this type of AI, right? We have maybe all seen or have heard, right? Cautionary warning of things like deep fakes. So trying to understand what AI is creating versus what's actually being said or presented. So you can have, let's see, anybody familiar with the actress Scarlett Johansson? Right? There was a potential deepfake where she was endorsing a product, but it wasn't actually her voice, right? And so she had to go sort of through the legal process to sort of challenge that. So AI is able to generate voices if it has a recording and it's able to learn that, becomes a potential challenge for sort of that deepfake space. And then potential issues, right, concerns misinformation, understanding sort of voter trust, right? This could be a potential challenge. Other ethical and legal accountability related to the generative space. Agentic AI, so this is the big sort of emerging one. It may be the one that is most, where people have the most question, because it is kind of in that newer space, right? The generative AI may have, it's been around, it's one that we engage with a little bit more. Agentic AI is an AI system capable of making decisions and taking actions with limited human oversight. So this is where AI starts to learn and provide information from its own self, right? So this is kind of a machine learning. It's learning and then making decisions without what we call human in the loop. Right, so technology, there's a human in the space that's keeping the technology moving, right? So the term you hear, human in the loop, that's what that means. There's a human interacting with the technology in some way, either verifying or checking the information. AI in the agentic space, the human is starting to be removed from the loop altogether, and AI is making the decisions without being sort of vetted, if you will. And then that brings us to kind of the question about the ability for AI to make decisions, right? So there's a sort of theoretical proposition known as the principal-agent problem. And this is where individuals like us, on a sort of day-to-day basis, give over our ability to make decisions for somebody else to act on our behalf, right? So a principal is giving the agent the autonomy to make decisions. Usually those decisions then are checked, right, by somebody, either an authority or by having sort of expertise to make a verification. But what happens if agentic AI is making those decisions without the human in the loop anymore? The principal agent problem becomes much more exacerbated because we don't know the authenticity of the decisions because no human is verifying, right? So that's where sort of the principal agent problem starts to become more problematic. Okay, so that's enough definitions stuff for me. What I want to do for the next few minutes, Dr. Gray, you have a timer.
Sure. I'll read you.
How long is the session? Till 3:30?
Full hour, yeah.
Oh, so let's take 25 minutes. So can you bring up the other document? So what I want us to do is engage with kind of our own thinking about these topics for the next, say, 25 minutes. So we naturally have some small groups here already. So we want to create 3 sort of small groups to have discussion around the application of AI in these 3 scenarios. Can everybody see this okay? Okay. So group 1 up here is kind of in this space here. Think about predictive policing. So this is kind of thinking about the justice or the application of AI. Let's say a city is using AI, either sort of in the analytical sense or we haven't got there yet in the agentic space, but we're kind of moving in that direction. If we're using that predictive policing, what potential benefits, what potential challenges exist for the use of AI in predictive policing, thinking about the justice frame, right? So who's impacted, how they're impacted, that kind of thing. Okay, does that make sense? Group one. Group two, let's say we're using this now so we have the policing space, but let's say we're using it in the judicial space, right? So the court system is now using AI to make decisions. So group two, that'll be this table and sort of part of this table, and then group three will be everybody back there. But, okay. So group two, what I want you to think about is AI is now reviewing applications for bail or reviewing documents for support on the sort of judicial consideration. Again, what potential challenges exist? What benefits might occur? What critical things that would we want a system to think about when going through those considerations? Okay, so group two, who's responsible, who should check that, who should verify the decision of the AI, right? So group two can work on that. And then group three, from a generative AI in elections, right? So what if, let's say, for example, AI created a candidate out of nothing, right? So this is a deepfake situation. The AI came up with all the credentials. It came up with all of the marketing material. It runs campaign ads, but this person doesn't actually exist, but they get voted into office. What happens? Technically, the AI was just voted into office under the scenario. What does that mean? What does that look like? So group three, kind of back table, maybe a couple of people on this side, kind of come together to think about that. Okay, does everybody make sense? We're all good on that? Questions? We'll take 25 minutes, we'll talk through our scenarios, then we'll come back and debrief together, and then we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. Okay? All right. So if we were like really close, we'd all put our things in and break. Okay. And I'll wander around. Whichever one has maybe or actually. How does AI ultimately right?
Okay, so we're just going to call fake candidate AI.
Like that's a big move. That's bad. Right.
I'd say think about it. What are there benefits and are there challenges?
When I did
What part of the scenario
it's represents
good qualities of some sort. So it's just in space.
She watches all the IDs.
What is that beautiful
Right. So if you had done it, right. Like AI was AI made a decision and then we determined that's just or not. So imagine that AI so
No, I would think, AI kind of.
I don't think AI doesn't have that.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
more or
So
less
emotions, like even if say your emotions is like
left to its own
it's
devices,
so
even that with realistic.
Right, because I did hear once there was an AI having a conversation and their purpose was to actually make the other person angry. It was a scam. It went on and on for a long time. And so, of course, the scammer's getting
Well,
frustrated.
I
But
mean,
the
they
AI
need
lady,
some kind of
she's just like, she's a
yeah,
I wish she was smart.
you know, like
So
40%
let's everyone in the
of
future
the
becomes
population
an expert in AI.
application is the most important.
just so much
I took coding, so now this is those who have no,
Okay, yeah,
Well,
it just seems like
so now we
so
have
it's
this
this name,
and those things
and
are
let's
like
just say that
it's something they
And
don't
so
do.
there's
like you said, I mean, even though they don't have a user there, we don't see AI to make a sign, it's a robot, right? So then the person that is a bad situation,
Stop.
in the situation,
Yes.
if they, do they just go, okay, it was fair, I will go with it, or not, if they decide not to go with it, and they
All I
feel
do
like
is get
it's
it done just by the year.
okay, go with the machine.
So it's not pretty.
She can't go any question.
So
that's the
other elections and stuff like people who like do more research on sideways about AI as a running game. Because like it's
Well, let me ask you, I guess the question is why, but the
Thoughts over there?
just because they also
it's a little far-fetched because most elections require something to debate or something. Well, I mean, they can generate an AI. You can't do that.
Westminster or any other education system ensure conspiracy, I guess, means yes, the AI machine may mistake.
Yeah, so part of it, I guess part of the question would be sort of the foundational kind of right. Like, if it were just that, say, Karen and I are both deciding to run political office, and I have the recording of Karen's voice, then I use trained AI, right, to create a deepfake of her speaking.
that also might change
Things.
Right,
And then I put out an ad about it, right? Like, oh, so, she doesn't like puppies, right? Like,
Say it's we need these rules to be placed in or whatever.
right.
So the computer program
And she maybe never had shared that
knows
with
they
me.
know
Right?
programming.
How do we know now?
So who's that
That's an
like
actual
in the human? Which they know that.
So this is kind of that deep fake, like office. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. So you could see that happening with any. Yeah. So that could be like that could be further line. But right, like if you think about any sort of current either politician or anybody that's running for political office, will
Yeah, well, I think part of this is just we're supposed to be
be
discussing
vigilant in a different way. Yeah, like it's like, oh, did so and so actually say this or did so and so say that, right? Like, so there's a
So yeah, it's kind of
like a bit, right? It does happen.
right now we're used to
We've seen it start to happen, right? So this is kind of where we want to think about. That's why I put that question in there because it's maybe one of the most considered things to see with sort of that deep fake generative AI.
Can AI, yeah, just, I mean, earlier today, someone was saying, someone said, pretty unbelievable
Right.
stuff.
So it's almost like in this
Probably
situation,
the
and
first one I
probably
would
a
think
lot
of
in the
to go
future,
to
it's just reducing the amount
would be AI.
or reducing the work.
Yeah, so there's a discussion, we had a little discussion about this earlier. Like
Right? It's kind of what we're
AI,
there's got to still be a human
use of AI, right? So like
but
having
don't
asking
need as
AI,
Yeah.
They could probably
it's an AI
expect
generated
they could
image,
expect
AI generated text, voice, right? Yes, AI can detect whether it can give you an indications as to whether the patterns that you use would be ones that AI would use, right? So it's kind of like think of it this way: it's like AI is the workspace itself. So it isn't, I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate, but it does give specific information about the language pattern that AI will. It would be able to give you how much of it.
Because like you said, you kind of need some emotions to make some decisions.
50% of
Somebody
this
is
work
just rule is you don't break the law, you broke the law. You go to jail, you sit on the family, that's what jury
Yeah,
is.
so right, this is in an educational sense, that's
Should we get rid of judges and
question,
juries
right,
altogether?
that teachers
That's a big part of our system.
how much of this is your work versus how much is AI. So yeah, none of these three are yeah, the thing is, like, there's a lot of additional things that you as a person that was put out about have to like, right, that you have to disprove
And it just like what
as
was
much
happening
information
in the
presented.
bail,
So you have a sort of heavier burden of proof there, right?
would it be ethical to use AI
Sent
to
out
determine if
mass,
somebody gets
right,
bail or
and then you have to counter that, right? Like, so
yeah,
it's there,
right,
right? Like, so that's hard.
ethical or not.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you thinking about like how is yeah, I like this is so yeah, I said so I can give you an example. So I was this summer I was at the UN's conference on AI, and there was a space I was presenting there, but my team. There was a demonstration area with all the different technologies and stuff. There was an AI candidate, so they were like modeling an AI. They had like a robot that had a like AI generated
Exactly.
walk around.
And there's like a whole situation about somebody
So this
or
is
somebody
like
because a lot of times the jury is just sort of like
someday a candidate
and you
just
can't
comes
use
out.
AI
Like,
to
okay, we have an AI candidate.
like
Let's vote.
show evidence.
Do we have any
Use AI.
way to prevent it? No, because as long as they but it's a way to think of, right, like how does somebody get on a ballot? Right? You get enough signatures to get on the ballot. If we all signed the ballot saying we wanted this AI candidate to run, right? So there becomes some legal and questions, but things that we want to start thinking about because they're like the way the process to get there hasn't thought about how.
But like the first line is how do you govern, how do you like monitor and restrict it?
Yeah. So anyway,
I think some policies do need to be put in place. especially like politically.
So there are one thing like at least in the context of PhDs, they have started drafting serious legislation some of the stuff in the U.S. context. We tend to be a little bit more reactive, proactive. So once something happens, it will create the law, especially in a emerging place like technology. It's like how much is the
Well, but if it's you're right, especially
market stuff, how much is like free speech, right? So we try to be a little bit more active when something happens. You take the so trying to be proactive and I'm not saying one way to each of them have their own I think having these conversations drafting a potential legislation something that even a year from now, right? Like, who knows what technology this technology changing
temporarily.
If it's a new bill.
And then whether by a year, like what if
this we
that's what's deciding if someone's gonna have paper.
Great.
Now you need to.
I wish.
What do you think about the we're talking about bills?
So how do we as citizens sort of move on?
Oh yeah,
We know we need legislature, we need rules. For sure. Anyway, so the citizens come back with their
Stuff on how institutions.
Okay.
Yeah. They do.
It's like a process.
Institution needs for transparency and accountability and stuff on that one.
I guess I kind of disagree though.
They should
I think
It's usually so it's a little bit of that based on severity of crime.
Yeah, I mean, of course,
Like, are you likely
just like
to
beginning
try to so if you flight risk, right, that kind of
plagiarism,
thing.
but
But then there are
plagiarism and all the similarities involved in because cheating and
bias.
but others make it easier.
Potential bias.
So there are of course rules for you still can't do that.
The reason America was able to
Yeah, like so if you're in a particular area, are there quote unquote high crime rates in the particular neighborhood that you come from? Right, like so there are these other factors that can and so I guess kind of one of the questions
I'm sure
here
there
would
were
be like,
programs that
is
do that.
Other countries are
Yeah.
discounting those and trying to make this more
and I think we have to, and it's, yes.
or is it not, right? Like, or is it actually exacerbating
So the professor, right, said, okay, you have this idea, you know, 2 pages there, however long, this is great. Okay, that's your homework, because you're doing like a legal or whatever, and then somebody turned it in like it's nice. It's like, yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, so right, like it could take out a little bit of the emotional consideration that you guys have been with me. Is that to make it a little more fair? Maybe makes it look like right? These are important. Just keep
That's what I most not AI itself, because I used to educate myself on
How is
trying to understand.
This like goes for great. Yeah, they say,
Or like people volunteering.
yeah, and it's being like this. So yeah,
So like, you can think of it like
the other question is, and it
Your person is like,
I mean,
CCTV is
so
like,
I-
everything, right? So they're technical.
Information, so
But how are they, right? How are they, like, who's getting that data and are they running, like, it's not, so it could sort of, like a minority report, right, like situation, right? Like, yeah, so it's kind of,
Yeah, that would be,
to be fair, yeah.
right.
In that space, it's
Totally true facts. Like my son when I was like, how far away can we hear the sun? Like how far is it from the sun? And like, I don't know, I still like this. And so that's AI. And so he has this exactly because then it's like an actual measurement.
Well,
So it's just
AI is
so
I wanna know.
no, they have painting. That's supposed to be a factor.
I think this is.
Yeah, like
So we're in
So how do you?
several in
That's something that is
AI.
Right.
Yeah, so, and that's where the law.
Too, though.
I realize that too. Yeah. Human error is a common phrase.
Yeah.
But also
Talking about
Like
3 months ago with how much energy
Is it to him that like self-consumed waters, like
and I wonder for the longest time I'm so curious about it. Put to the test of saving this,
Yeah, so like,
of making AI less
point
energy.
I mean, is it
the quality.
Seems like something that someone.
because I think we have to, you said though.
Or maybe that's what.
LLM, right, that's like.
I haven't gotten that far.
What you're training the data
And
on.
Some people are right ahead of me.
If that data itself had already been valuable in some
No, I
way,
mean, if
the
it would run off
AI,
AI, it would be.
irrespective of its fallibility, is inherently
Like it could
because
look at human workers depending on how they react.
So as a
code,
Right.
right,
A lot of
exactly,
time,
right, like, so yeah,
AI
so if we think about this, like a computer system.
like one or two steps
But yeah, like,
might be good to
as
take
a programmer,
directly in
I
relation
work in
to
Identical.
being biased in some way.
scenario.
There was underlying bias
According
in
to
the data, and the
AI
machine
generated
learned that
things.
without intelligence. So yeah, that's the
Should
challenge.
we- should we-
Yeah, and it's hard to, and the thing too, think about trying to train that out. It's already learned that
For
in
the
the system.
to vote on and
Let's say there's like
Canceling out.
versions of the system, and then you go in and you kind of like take that piece out.
So who,
It's already embedded in other sections of the AI, right? Like,
maybe we need
So,
some.
even if you kind of remove the code,
We should be in the.
it learns some of that stuff that's still there. Right? So it's hard to.
Are they the best choices for deciding that?
Yeah, definitely people like businesses that are doing
I'm just
in
asking
the
the
way of
question.
like
Maybe
taking
they should start with.
If they should-
You know how like somebody said I'm gonna get rid of it entirely. I can see us getting rid of it entirely, especially with like Teslas.
Yeah.
You know, or just
People understand that.
but
Yeah, and the same.
Yeah, but
decided to not use it in what is conditions.
so that's.
Unless you're using AI.
Good ability to
Don't get me wrong, but use it as a tool. Use it against the law too. Yes, exactly. You can use it for research.
Like, yeah, like what is, yeah, what is that
What is the
data?
law, like, what is the law state when it comes to this situation?
It's just
The
like-
law is already determined,
And we know that.
but not necessarily make a decision That's somebody
trained into
I
it.
think
Yeah,
at some point,
I think
And even if it's not that person specific, right? Let's think of a sort of quote unquote maybe high crime area or community that tends to have high crime, right? Even if you aren't committing crimes, but you live in the vicinity of that area, right? Just because of proximity, you sort of AI could, okay, you live close, and maybe you did.
Yeah, like if
So
they
it's starting to
stay
make
like-
solve
There's so many movies like
like
that.
You're trying
So many movies.
Yeah, like
The whole room.
homicide is.
What if that creates like these
Like they have like farms and evidence.
crazy, like
Never
drastic
turned
stuff,
out
like,
right.
I think that talks about what you were saying, like reactive,
Kind of like,
I think something like
Yeah,
that.
that's
that-
right.
that-
No, there are so many movies.
And that's what, instead of being proactively taking away like some of our freedom.
I just think it's the clear edges, so it's not someone from doing something
Sure. That could be right, like sort of
Yes, right. I've seen.
one area that could be sort of helpful.
You've never
I
seen
guess,
the
in this
skeleton
space
of
is,
a
like,
hippopotamus?
at least in
now
the traffic
it
sense,
becomes
right?
like
Using
this.
AI to
What if they
And then if you look at
cars and
it,
license plates
I don't see hardly any of
could
it.
speed up that
like maybe
process.
exactly
Go and like, so if you're giving it parameters as opposed to just letting it do its own.
concept, idea, principle.
I have seen
Doesn't pass.
many MRIs and
I don't
CTs, and I don't know.
Straight pass. But it's something.
My doctors will explain it to me, and then I just,
when it's basic.
they're like, this is this, and this is this, and I'm like, that's black and white right there. That's all I see.
What I look like? We're 11.5.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and start kind of wrapping up our thoughts here. We got about a minute left. You don't have to like stop the conversation to distract.
I know they aren't all right. So that's right.
Then we'll come back and start kind of sharing our
I know
thoughts
that's a
about
brain.
each of these scenarios.
That's a
I believe it was about 10 or 15 minutes or so with Q&A. Oh yeah.
There's 15 stuff.
Oh, trying to be not my complete professor software. I'm just like, all right, I got all the time. All right, so initial thoughts. What do we think? Let's sort of as a collective, and then we'll go through each of the scenarios and each group can kind of talk about, sort of share their impressions of that space. Do we feel more about the same or less either supported or sort of against kind of the notion of AI so far? More cautionary, about the same, or less cautionary?
I'd say against it.
Okay, so a little bit against it. Okay, that is fine because I think we want to be critical, right? I think at this stage of AI's development, it's good to sort of be critical now instead of down the road we have something happen and we don't know what that is and try to go backwards, right? So conscious optimism, maybe measured optimism, might be a way to think about it. Good. So here.
Sorry, one thing I think as we determined, it seems very unethical to use artificial intelligence when it comes to somebody's life. Like here we are talking about criminal justice. Something can Siri.
Speaking of AI, Siri.
Yeah, it seems just really like if I were accused of a crime and then I find out that it was AI that determined what maybe my sentence or bail would be, I'd be very pissed off about it. But I can also see how a judge would want to use AI because they go, it's not my fault. The AI decided it. You can't put it against me. So that seems unethical.
Yeah, so there's right, like this underlying question of like ethics and that sort of transparency of the process, and I think all three of these are intended to sort of get us thinking about that principal agent, right? Like if we turn that decision making over to somebody that's not human, how do we know the value or authenticity of the decision, right? So if the human is removed from the loop entirely, how does that then impact our, in this case, in the judicial system, our appeal or our way to argue our guilt innocence, right? Like the sort of back and forth between the guilt and innocence of our position. right? So that does sort of bring up a lot of that principal agent question. Thank you.
I still think it's entirely situational,
Mhm.
and depends on how much data the algorithm can use.
Mhm.
Certain scenarios have more data, where others don't have as much data.
Mhm.
And algorithms run better if there's a ton of data compared to a small amount.
Yeah. So there are data authenticity, data quality, data use questions, right? So the amount of data that we're able to give AI, the quality of that data, the type of the data that it's getting to train itself, right? Again, in a sort of language learning model, it's all about training the AI, and so it's training itself on the types of data, right? So in the case of the group one, right, for the community policing or the predictive policing, right, if AI is being trained on data that's either too old, right, so maybe it doesn't represent the current state of sort of crime data in a particular area, or maybe it's doing predictive policing based on individuals who are just in close proximity to the quote-unquote high crime area, right? So it's starting to sort of question some of that data. So it is very sort of contextual, which is important. Good. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I would say our group, when we were talking about the voter situation, really there needs to be some kind of guardrail. But at the same time, in prohibitive, and I think the group as a whole prohibiting AI closes the door on potential creative uses for that could solve problems that we haven't even realized exist yet.
Yeah.
And so, we don't have any answer to that, but if I was that candidate that got used against, I'd be angry.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like for example, right, if I decided I was running for public office, somebody had access to recorded lectures of me, even though those recorded lectures have nothing to do with what I'm running on, they could use that lecture to train AI to provide a deep fake based on my voice and have it say anything, really. And then I, as the candidate, have the burden of proof to disprove that position, right? So this is kind of where that the challenge of the deep fake sort of generative space, right? So yeah, I mean that's a great point, right? If you're in sort of the public space in any way, there's always this potential challenge, right? That exists there. Good. Yeah.
So let's say that happens in scenario 3. There's a candidate produced and this and that. Is there a punishment for the system? The AI is like what happens then?
Probably not the AI system itself. It would have to be sort of litigated against the person that created it.
Really?
Right. Yeah. So
even though it's learning on its own.
Yeah. So so this would be a question of like if it's purely in the generative AI space or if it were over here in the agentic space, right? So if it were an agentic AI that's now sort of autonomous in making its own decisions, then that would be sort of uncharted area, right? Because the judicial system doesn't have a sort of case, right? Because the way sort of the judicial system kind of would work there is it would look for precedent, but there is no precedent, right? So now we have to create precedent. So then it would be litigated on its similar precedent of other situations, right? So then it probably would be against the company that created that specific AI for damages. Would be my suspicion, but yeah, that's how I would imagine that. So, yeah.
And with that, it's comparative to something like mass shootings, or how far back you go in blame, because people have tried to sue firearm manufacturers and blame them for why mass shootings are happening. But if you never intended for your product to be used that way or another, then you can't really be blamed.
Yeah. So there is a sort of question of sort of the source of where did the source of the problem start, right? Like, so you have to kind of litigate that piece of it. Good. No, I mean these are all good. Other thoughts? Still gonna time?
Yeah, so 15 minutes.
Perfect. All right. So I want to keep having this conversation. I want to kind of open this up to kind of a Q&A. I want to frame a little bit here too. So we looked at this in sort of three potentially kind of negative connotations, right? I find that it's easier to start the conversation here than starting it on the beneficent side, right? Like the benefits of things. So there are ways, right, in which AI is and currently is working on improving our space. So one example that we could think of here is especially in the medical field, right? So medical AI is doing a lot of really good things to help expedite treatments and cures, right? So I was reading a report, this is probably a few months ago now, because time is an odd construct. It was talking about the College University of London. Their medical program has been using medical AI to look for treatments to antibiotic resistant strains. And so they gave it sort of this set of formulas for medication and asked it to find out, are there new combinations that would work against these antibiotic resistant strains? And in the matter of about 18 months, AI had run 10 to the 64th power combinations of drugs. And 90% of those were effective against the strain that they thought had right, like it's antibiotic resistance, there's no new thing you could do. So AI, right, in the matter of 18 months, found a astronomical number of potential combinations that could work. We as individuals, right, as we were all medical professionals in here, each of us doing this wouldn't have found that in 5 to 10 years. Not even half of the 10 to the 60. It would have been like 10 to the 2, maybe not even that. Right? So it's taking that large, long time and condensing it down, right, to find treatment. There have been other reports recently about finding treatments for cancers and those types of things.
I've seen two things. I've seen AI being used to detect breast cancer sooner and tumors sooner.
Yep.
And then also, I know the Alexander Society of London has been using it as a way to test different diagnostic questionnaires, essentially. And it's been effective so far, but using it for those sort of things that humans can't do is really
Yeah, and so in that same sort of diagnostic space, right? Another good example is using X-rays and having AI identify potential cancers or anomalies that's sort of based on the X-ray scan, right? We can give it a bunch of X-rays, and it's pretty accurate at predicting which of those should be looked at. So that frees up the physician to spend more time with the patient instead of going through thousands of X-rays to determine, okay, this one's not right. So this is a more efficient use of that kind of human-in-the-loop situation, right, where the physician can give a bunch of X-rays, AI spend a few minutes running through those, flagging the ones that need further investigation while the physician is off doing other patient-related things. They can come back, right? So this is an efficiency kind of question, right? So part of this, right? This gets back to this context. Part of the question here is the context in which AI might be used is an important consideration when we think about, again, the pros and cons and the type. So fully agentic versus generative AI. So questions, thoughts? It's kind of where we have the open dialogue section of any burning questions that
has anybody done a pro-con chart to look at the positive versus negative outcomes of the use of AI to see which side's winning?
That's great. I would imagine that I haven't seen one myself. I would say it's probably dependent on the field, the field that's kind of doing it, right? So one thing that I actually just came to mind, sort of asking that question, is the pros and cons of AI as a financial planner, right? So the field of financial planning has had a lot of success with AI making predictions about movements in the market, but it has a lot of historical data to sort of trend analysis, right? So at least in that space, they've had a lot of kind of success to be like, okay, we can start to sort of identify trends in the market that way. This goes back to Jennifer's question about job displacement, right? If I have access to a financially trained AI, then do I need the human to make financial recommendations? Maybe, right? So part of that's right, like that. That then I think comes down to the individual's comfort with, do they fully want to integrate AI into their financial planning, or do they want to have a combination of a person and an AI helping? Maybe they just want all person, right? Like, so I think that then becomes a sort of personal choice in that situation. Some of these other things, right? Like yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, even if we decide AI in one case is totally good or in another case is totally bad, there still has to be a layer when we're talking about questions of equity. For example, which hospitals have access to those algorithms, and is it going to be provided to them for free in perpetuity, or is it going to be capitalized where only some populations are able to go to those hospitals? Or if we decide AI is totally bad in college education, is it going to be restricted to certain populations to go to these schools that are like AI free? That's just an example. I'm not saying we should do that, but
yeah, no, I mean that's a good right. Like thinking about health equity in the space of AI, or education equity in the space of AI, right? Especially if we think about sort of larger global questions of AI, right? So if we think about sort of developing countries, limited access to just the grid to be able to implement AI, right? Are they sort of from an equity standpoint, they're being left out of the conversation because they're not giving their voice, right, in the creation of the AI space. Right? So AI isn't learning from their community, and so then it would be making predictions about their community without being trained on culture and the sort of data that their voice would bring to the conversation. So that's especially from an educational access question. Good. Other thoughts, questions, concerns, things about AI?
Like my mom used to work as nurse factories,
Oh.
and when they use AI to run a whole system in the food factory, when it malfunctions, it shuts down the entire thing, putting them behind and making them another business running. Whereas when you run it with multiple people, if one thing goes down, another people down, so you don't run as well.
Yeah, so part, right, like here's a question of, right, of the value of a human in the loop, right? So part of the AI training or AI running could do some of the sequencing and all of the sort of stuff, but having a person there to kind of make sure that it doesn't break and it doesn't, right? Like, because then if it does and nobody's there to check it, it just goes without, right, for however long it goes. There's a similar sort of machine learning component, especially in so here's another issue that we haven't talked about yet, but this is like the environmental impact associated with AI. But before we kind of go in that way,
that's what I was going to say.
Is that so AI is able to help wind turbines, for example, learn from themselves. So they machine train themselves on how to modify or to change direction to be the most efficient in the current wind conditions. So you don't need the person there to be like, okay, I need you to move, X number of degrees. the AI is starting to recognize the pattern and it will automatically train the other system, right? Like you think about a network of wind turbines, they're all communicating with one another and making slight adjustments to be as efficient as possible, right? So this is a sort of way in which AI is kind of efficient, right, in helping machine modifications be as efficient as possible, especially for output of energy. Now that doesn't take into consideration the amount of energy it's taking to like store the data for the AI, but that's another environmental issue.
I think at this point we have time for one more question.
One more question, thought, concern.
I'll do it.
Okay. Oh,
No, go ahead. I already did it. You're my teacher.
Okay, specifically pertaining to scenario theory, do you think introducing more AI can help reduce some public inflammation in politics?
it could, right? Like it could. There's ways in which, right? So part of the question here would be, how are we using AI to identify deepfakes and stuff, right? Like, so it's a tool that can be helpful in recognizing, right, when misinformation, fake information, especially that has been generated from other AI. So it's good at detecting patterns created by other systems.
Just in a general sense, not even regarding deepfakes, regarding the current political state, specifically in the United States democracy.
Yeah, I think we'd have to have enough data sort of to start training models on that, but it would become possible eventually. We just need the right amount of data for it to start training itself. So that great question. My last note here before I let us all go is that yes, there are a lot of potential concerns, considerations that we want to make now than 1 to 5 years in the future, but also don't give up hope on AI because there are also, again, potential benefits, right? So we're at the point, this is the critical reflection point where we need to start thinking about both those pros and cons of this type of technology. I don't want to leave us on a negative note of AI because there are certainly negatives, but there are also positives. But this is the critical time that we start having conversations about the future of AI.
So a quick announcement, the director asked me to remind everybody that the time for the executive sessions after this are 3:45 to 4:45. It is correct online. It's correct in one place in the program, but you realize there's a misprint in others. So just in case anybody's worried about the executive sessions that follow, they are at 3:45 until 4:45. All right, so everybody will join me then in thanking Dr. Fletcher for
Thank you for coming to the session and engaging in the conversation. Hope you found it like or something to take away and start thinking about more as you engage with AI technology. Yes, that's true. No, that's a great question. There is a whole space of like AI and sort of creative, right?
I think
So this summer, I was at the UN's conference on AI, and I went to a session that they were talking. Like there were a whole bunch of musicians and artists, filmmakers. Had a panel, and they were talking about how they engage with AI and sort of like how they leverage it to help with some aspects, but some potential concerns, right? So sort of cutting down the time on like for efficiency purposes, but also that, right? Like what are some other concerns, right? So there's definitely space for it, but yeah, you want to make sure that